Hello and welcome to the Sales Code Leadership Podcast with me, Kevin Teeler, your host, and our guest this week, Dick Dunkel. Dick, how are you today?
Doing great, Kevin. Thank you for having me.
Hey, you're very welcome indeed. I've been so looking forward to this call. I'm going to open by telling a little story, if I may. I think salespeople are generally good storytellers. My first software sales job was at Symantec in 1997. They were the antivirus people. And also we had a product ACT, which was kind of one of the first contact management systems. It wasn't in the cloud, this stuff, right? It was all prem.
I used ACT. I was an ACT user, absolutely.
You used it, right? It was very famous at the time. And I was trying to hire salespeople for this team while I was at Symantec. We were not the massive company that Symantec became in those days. This is 25, 26 years ago. And so it wasn't the easiest thing to do in the world. And I was interviewing people and was finding that candidates were disappearing to go and work for this other company everyone started talking about. They were based not that far from where I lived. I lived in what we used to call kind of Silicon Valley in the UK. Nothing like Silicon Valley that you know, but there was a sort of golden triangle around between Reading and London, really, and Windsor. And this company that all the best people seemed to be joining was called Parametric Technology Corporation, or PTC for short. That's a true story. It took me a long time to figure out what it was that you guys were doing to attract the best talent and to make them successful. But the topic we're going to talk about today directly relates to that, doesn't it? Because one of the things that you guys came up with, and you were absolutely instrumental and pivotal in this, is inventing or coming up with a way of codifying, I should say, the way in which you would qualify opportunities to make sure they progressed at speed. Right. And that was called MEDDICC in the early days. So, yeah, I'm just so pleased to have you on board, my friend. I really
thank you, Kevin. It's great to be here. And I'll tell you a quick story as well. And by the way, I loved ACT. I actually never felt more productive as a salesperson because I was able to organize my email lists. I was able to organize my campaigns. I mean, it was really a tool that was built for sales reps. It was a personal productivity tool. Yeah. As compared to, unfortunately, what CRM became, which was, obviously really good for forecasting and managing the business, but a lot of salespeople.
You're right. That's a really good point. I hadn't thought about that. It was actually, and it was built for sales reps, and it was to the point of, because it wasn't cloud enabled, there was a kind of server-based version, but it was really quite difficult as a manager to inspect what people are doing. So it wasn't really designed for that at all. You're right. And what came later is, unfortunately, we've put too much effort into kind of inspecting salespeople to a degree. So you're absolutely right. I
had this old laptop that was pretty heavy, and I had the software loaded, the floppy loaded onto the laptop. And there was no network, so if you wanted to copy your data from one laptop to another laptop, or if you had a new territory assignment, you had to get somebody to copy your customer list onto a floppy. And then you would floppy.
I know. It's extraordinary, isn't it? It really is. Who would have thought we'd 26 years later, you and I would finally meet up to be talking about the one thing which has really lasted over the years, apart from you and I, and you're looking good on it, is the MEDDICC acronym, the MEDDICC system, which has been revived, I should say, repopularized and codified it so successfully by your friend of mine, Andy White, over the past few years. Done a fantastic job. As I understand it, you've now joined MEDDICC.com, the UK organization that Andy runs, as the chief customer officer. Is that correct?
That's right. And so, after a career in sales and sales leadership and sales enablement, I'm getting to fulfill the customer lifecycle journey of my resume, by really focusing on the entire, customer journey and particularly on focusing on kind of the post-sale, value realization, adoption, realization, renewal, because we do want to, establish a lasting relationship where we're actually helping our customers to continue to improve, and strengthen their sales execution. And we think that that's a journey that most organizations want to go on.
We're going to come back to that in a second, but let's talk about your journey a little bit, if I may. Is this the career you had in mind at 16, Dick?
At 16, wow, that's a great question. Well, I'll tell you, at 16, I was sort of approaching, I was in high school. I was sort of trying to decide what I wanted to be when I grew up. I think that as I entered college, I didn't really have a really clear idea or plan, but I was good at math and science. And so my parents and I decided that maybe engineering was the way to go. So I got a 4-year engineering degree, civil engineering. And after I graduated from college, I spent 2 years doing site planning and stormwater management. I'm responsible for designing the stormwater management system at the Philadelphia airport at the UPS facility. So if you go over there, you won't see a lot of puddles on the runway because of that outstanding drainage we designed into
Engineered by Dunkel.
The grading system is flawless there. But after a couple of years of that, and I had seen the careers that my parents had, my mom actually sold site remediation services, hazardous waste remediation services, did an incredible service to our environment, and went into some of these what we called Superfund sites in the United States, which were these sites that had been left by manufacturing companies that didn't do the proper job of cleaning up after themselves. And so she sold those services, and my dad sold advertising and media in big publications. And so I saw the careers they had, and I sort of knew that I was kind of destined to be in sales. And so I, after a couple of years of discovering that I wasn't really a great engineer, that I made my way to Xerox Corporation. Had 6 great years at Xerox, and then after that experience, made my way to Parametric Technology Corporation, which was a very interesting experience of going from Xerox, buttoned up Xerox, to PTC, which was very kind of edgy and intense kind of sales environment. Really one of the first software companies to reach $1 billion in annual sales, and achieved over the course of the time that I was there something like 40 and prior to me getting there, 40 consecutive quarters of sequential revenue and profit growth. So they had an incredible track record and great sales leadership, and also an incredibly innovative product. So the combination of great product and great sales leadership gave them, an incredible run in the 90s, and then they've since reinvented themselves, and they continue to be a very innovative company.
Who was the sales leader there, Dick?
Guy named John McMahon. Well, so the organization was led by a guy named Dick Harrison, and so Dick was the president of the company, but he was actually a salesman through and through. Came from Prime Computer, and then there were a couple of senior level sales guys, a guy by the name of Mike McGinnis, as well as John McMahon. John was my boss's boss when I eventually went into sales development. So I started out as a sales rep in Eastern Pennsylvania, and after about a year and a half, almost 2 years of very successful selling in the field, I was invited to join the sales development program at PTC. And so I was recruited by a woman named Ann Gary, and Ann worked for John. And I was also had a teammate by the name of Jack Napoli, who's a well-known character in the history of MEDDICC. And so I joined the team, and my responsibility was to develop an intermediate sales training class. And it was during the development of that intermediate sales training class that I coined the acronym. So it actually was coined in my kitchen in a rented house in Needham, Massachusetts. And the funny thing about it is I'd only been with the organization for a couple of months, that we were doing this exercise that I think is now pretty well known. It's called Why Do We Win? Why Do We Lose? And Why Do Deals Slip? And so we ran this exercise a couple of times, and I kept, we would bucket the answers, and we kept coming up with the same 6 things. So I went to John and I said, we keep coming up with these 6 things: metrics, economic buyer, decision criteria, decision process, identified pain, and champions. And John said, I think we should incorporate this into our training. I want you and Jack should go and roll this out across the entire organization. And so, kind of the rest is history.
I think the most amazing thing you did was come up with an acronym that was 6 letters, which is now 7, isn't it? With the P for paper process, because That's of right. SaaS-based sales. But 6, this is a very good system, by the way, because you've done good work, you guys, because 6 is a big number to remember. I mean, one of the reasons I love Spin, well, firstly, because Spin Selling is actually a very good book, well researched and stood the test of time. It's only 4 letters.
That's right. And I love Spin Selling. And it was,
Yeah.
it was actually,
it's on your bookshelf. I can see it, I think, on the
I
shelf.
think it actually was formative to me, the fact
Mhm.
that, when I was at Xerox, they really put a lot of effort into Spin Selling. And for me, I always thought of selling as kind of an art. But Spin broke it down into some very digestible components of understanding the situation, defining the problem, exploring the implications, and then the needs payoff. And I thought, well, gee, that's really, really logical and a great way to really define customer requirements. And so to me, that was kind of formative. And I think ultimately helped lead me to, sort of the framework that we used for at PTC. I'll also say that, I think the interesting thing about PTC was that PTC was a very innovative company. And so MEDDICC was purpose-built for that environment, a very competitive, growth-oriented, innovative, disruptive technology company that had a very complex and political selling and decision process. Right. So you're navigating through, you're selling a disruptive solution. You're navigating through a political organization. You're trying to develop champions that can help you to navigate, through this environment. And you're trying to negotiate a decision process that helps you to get to consensus so that you can ultimately drive this change. And so that's the environment that MEDDICC was born in. And so as innovative technology has really exploded, more and more, all of these companies that have innovative, disruptive technologies that require more and more people to be involved to make decisions, it's a perfect fit. It's very compatible. And it's not to say that MEDDICC or MEDDPICC is for everybody, but for those kinds of organizations, it's absolutely purpose-built. And then when you add on top of that, the fact that now we're in a world of SaaS, that MEDDICC is not just, get the deal, it's win the account, it's deliver on the promise. And so, we have more and more delivery and success and, consulting people, post-sale people that fully embrace, and absorb the principles of MEDDICC.
What does the I stand for again?
So I is for the identification and implication of pain. And so in the original version, right, we had 6 things, right? Metrics, economic buyer, decision criteria, decision process, pain, and champions. And so we had 6 letters and 1 vowel. So we had to finagle a little bit on the I is for pain. The first time I ever presented it, there was a guy, I swear to God, there was a guy that raised his hand the first time we ever did the exercise, and I presented. I said, the answer is MEDDICC. And he said, you mean to tell me that I is for pain? I said, yes, you're damn right it is. And so he said, that's the worst acronym I've ever heard.
The
rest of the story is that a week later, he called me and he said, hey, I know I was making fun of your acronym. He goes, I want to tell you something. He goes, I am never going to forget it. I use it every day. I use it before every meeting. I'm using it as a way to evaluate, sort of the gaps in my opportunities. He's like, I absolutely love it, and I'm never going to forget it.
What a great thing! What a great thing you guys.
That was a good validation.
Yeah, absolutely. And then Andy White comes along 20 years later, gets obsessed by it because that's the kind of guy he is, as we know. Writes this brilliant book. You've now got this range of video training materials. I've been through all of your stuff, I think most of it twice, and love it. So can only recommend this. There's a way of increasing your potential as a salesperson. I think you and I, Dick, we share the same passion, which is to elevate the role of selling to a profession in the way that, as you say, engineering is. And one of the ways you do that is by using methodologies that are proven.
That's right.
Lasted, right? Building hasn't changed in many ways that much, I guess. Engineering hasn't changed that much. Selling has changed, you're right. And certainly in our world, the arrival of the internet and SaaS-based solutions have put an extra dimension on it. But I think, as you say, actually only added to the need, because deals are bigger now. They're more complex. They've got more stakeholders. They've got more moving parts. This is really where MEDDICC and MEDDPICC comes into play, isn't it?
That's right, for sure. And, I think that's one of the reasons why it really has been durable, is because, it obviously was created in this complex environment. I will say, engineering has come a long way. And maybe there's a good analogy there that, one of the things that PTC innovated was this idea of three-dimensional parametric modeling. And so we were going into these organizations where, they were still doing 2D drafting, and they were having to build physical prototypes of products to figure out whether or not they would actually assemble correctly. And once you have a three-dimensional model and you can make changes to the model so that it actually performs optimally, that had a huge impact on the quality of the design and on the speed to market. And so to me, I think that's actually a pretty good analogy, is that I think in a lot of ways, MEDDIC does the same thing. It provides that clarity, it provides that transparency, so that you can obviously make better decisions about where you're spending your time, and you can kind of more efficiently navigate your way through the process. I think is driving positive outcomes for, not just the sales organization, but ultimately for the customer. And I think maybe that's something worth mentioning here, is that one of the real benefits of MEDDIC over the years is that I think there are a lot of sales leaders now who view it as something that really brings significant transparency to the engagements. That selling isn't something that we're doing to the customer, it's something that we're doing with the customer. And you can literally walk through the elements of MEDDIC or MEDDPICC with a customer, with a procurement person. And you can say, the reason we're here is because we're trying to solve a meaningful problem for your business, right? We want to define your requirements, and then we want to navigate through a process so that we can get consensus of your organization on what the right solution is. And we want to make sure that we develop people in your organization that want this thing to succeed. And we want to make sure we align with the executives so that they're making an investment in something that they know is going to pay a return. As a procurement person, you would listen to that and you would be like, well, that sounds pretty good to me. In fact, I've had that conversation with procurement people, and sometimes they say, that sounds exactly like how we want to engage with your organization. And by the way, could you teach this to the rest of our vendors? Because that sounds like a pretty good engagement model. So I think that the idea of there being transparency and clarity means that people can spend their time more wisely. And that means qualifying in or qualifying out.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think Andy's always saying, isn't he, you never regret qualifying out. Do you think that's always true?
Well, yeah, I would say that is just about always true. And there are times when and we sort of talk a lot about that. It's a very dramatic, way to say it. But the reality is that in practice, what you're saying is, gee, Kevin, it seems like maybe now's not the right time. Maybe we should reconnect in a few months or in 6 months when, we can dig a little bit deeper, when we can actually organize a proper discovery. And Kevin's going to do one of two things. He's going to be like, hey, you're right. We've got other priorities right now. Let's reconnect in a few months. Or Kevin's going to say, hang on a second, don't go. Yeah. Right. And either one of those outcomes is a good outcome. And so I think that, encouraging people, some people refer to it as negative selling. That's a legitimate how-to. We talk about sort of the what versus the how-to. That is a very effective how-to that I think, experienced sellers use wisely.
And how does MEDDIC work in that context, between the what and the how-to? Yeah,
love the question. This goes very much to, I think, sort of the longevity or the durability of MEDDIC is that look, I'll take you back to my days at PTC. When I was at PTC, we were deploying MEDDIC across the entire company, but we were also reading Selling to Veto, and we were also reading Power-Based Selling, Secrets of an Ivy League Street Fighter, right, by Mac Hannon. Mm-hmm. Great book. So these are techniques. And today we have the Challenger sale, yep. Right? Fantastic book, great principles in framing the problem and engaging with senior leaders. Those are fantastic how-tos, right? But they're a means to the end, and the end is MEDDIC. That's the thing that you got to get. Right? You've got to get the metrics. You've got to get the executive alignment. You've got to influence the decision criteria, right? Those are all things that you have to accomplish. Now, the manner in which you secure those things is up to you. And those things are going to change over time, right? We've got new tools, we've got artificial intelligence, right? Things are emerging and changing rapidly that the how-tos are going to change, but the underlying, right, the outcomes that have to be achieved in order for an organization to make a decision that is going to be disruptive to their organization, that's going to cost them money and cost them time, but it's going to drive a positive business outcome for them, right? These are the things that have to be addressed if you're going to be able to get a large, complex organization to actually make a consensus decision about something that's going to be disruptive to their organization, but is going to ultimately provide a positive business outcome if you do a proper job of executing.
You think, is there a way of sort of identifying if you're a sales leader, a SaaS company, let's say not the biggest SaaS company in the world, right? Not the most complex sale, not the highest value sale. Is there a level at which MEDDIC becomes, or MEDDIC becomes a good thing to go with? Right? And is there a way of identifying whether it's the right?
No, I get it. I get it.
Right. I mean, that's what I'm getting to, I suppose.
I think that, and again, I'm going to, this is going to sort of speak to the success of MEDDIC, is that while it was born in an environment of highly innovative, highly complex, high growth, right? That the relevancy of all of those things applies, for any organization that is selling a solution that requires more than one person to make a decision, right? You've got a couple of people that have to look at the decision. You've got somebody that owns the budget or somebody that's making the budget available. You've got a solution that's going to be interacting with maybe other solutions, right? So it's not necessarily a standalone thing. We're not selling ACT anymore. I'm sorry, Kevin.
I know, those were the days. It was a lot easier in those days.
Right? Everything we sell now is interconnected. And so there are other stakeholders, right? There are other buying influences. And so I think in those situations, right, of course, defining requirements, defining a decision process are all going to factor into it. I think maybe where MEDDIC maybe loses some of its relevance is if you're selling a pure commodity. You're selling a pure commodity and the decision is based on delivery and price. And I think in that situation, then, you've got kind of simpler dynamics that may work for you. But I think that the number of organizations, and that's part of the reason why why MEDDIC has been so successful in technology. But certainly in other areas, there are lots of other areas where, there are complex decisions that interact with, a variety of stakeholders that certainly, there are many situations that it applies, but certainly tech has been central. And
you're the chief customer officer now.
Correct.
So if I'm a customer or a prospective customer, would I speak to you only after I've become a customer?
It may come to that someday, but no, in the present day, I wear a variety of hats. I love participating in the sales cycle. We've got a great sales team led by Pim, and Andy, and I are very engaged in sales cycles. And, I tend to sort of maybe be a little bit more sort of adding a little bit of color here and there pre-sales. But my team, led by Sophie Allen, she and I are very focused on really trying to build that customer journey. Building the onboarding plan, making sure that organizations, are getting access to the content that they need, that they have a strategic approach to adopting MEDDIC and MEDDPICC and incorporating them into their CRM systems so that they can have a way to measure, the impact of the training, and that they have a way to, identify opportunities for targeted development. Ultimately, the goal is to help organizations build a framework and a methodology around continuous improvement, because we think that every organization, every sales organization, and every organization has a better version of itself waiting to get out. And certainly, I think any sales leader worth their salt will tell you that their organization does some things right, but that there's a significant opportunity for improvement. And if you can improve, if you leverage MEDDPICC as a way to improve execution, the opportunities for those businesses are massive. execution translates into so many positive business outcomes: customer retention, customer growth, sales cycle, total lifetime value of customers.
Mm-hmm.
All of those things are directly impacted by quality execution. And so that's what we're striving to unlock for companies.
It's a bold ambition, Dick. Now, so if I was a customer coming to you and kind of trying to get my head around how we achieve this sort of move from MEDDICC as a checklist deal inspection tool for managers to interrogate their sales teams, which we know has some value, right? It may be improving your forecast accuracy, but it's not, you're not teaching the salespeople anything by using it that way. How do we get from that to a mindset shift, which is all about coaching, as you say, and improvement and
right on
leveling up sales? But how do we do that?
For sure.
What's your approach to that?
Yeah. So I think the approach here is, and I think most organizations have evolved to the point where they have very well-defined sales stages. And so to me, I think that's the key ingredient, is that sales stages and having a well-defined playbook that is built on top of MEDDICC, right, provides organizations with very clear success criteria defined by stage. And so each stage, we've got sales stages that people are familiar with, where you're initially profiling, where you're, having an introduction, where you're doing some initial discovery, where you're scoping the final requirements, where you're engaging with executives, where you're conducting a POV, where you're finally negotiating a process, right? Like, those are common names for sales stages. But when you define very clearly within each of those sales stages, what is it that we're providing to the customer, and what is it that we're getting in return, right? There's ultimately, I guess, this is about as old as it gets when you talk about sales, sales sayings, is it's a give to get, right? That you're providing something of value to the customer and you're getting something in return. And that thing that you're getting in, what you're providing is insights. You're providing them with, the realization that there's a better way to do things than the way they're doing them today. You're showing them and you're giving them insights into how other companies like them have solved similar problems, right? That's real value that you're providing. You're aligning with the strategic priorities of the business. So you're able to communicate to an executive the fact that you can actually impact one of their strategic priorities. That's real value. What can we expect in return? Well, we'd like to have some agreement on sort of, a sequence of events that will help us to come to a definitive decision. We want to have agreement on definitively what are your requirements, so that we can decide whether or not we're potentially a good fit, right? And so we go through the elements of MEDDICC, but they're a progression, right? We're progressing through securing the elements of MEDDICC stage by stage. And by doing that, then you can very clearly define what is quality execution look like at each sales stage. Some people refer to it as disciplined execution, right? Did we thoroughly execute this discovery stage? Did we thoroughly execute this scoping stage? Did we thoroughly secure executive alignment? That means that we've delivered something of real value to the customer, but we've also received the things in return that are allowing us to justify our continued investment here, right? And this is the power of qualifying in or out, right? Is that if we're just giving and we're not getting, right, then this is where intelligent sales reps make decisions about qualifying out, right? They're deprioritizing these opportunities, and that's a very powerful tool for reps who, by the way, now have, if they follow this logic and this approach, now have a very objective way to make these decisions, right? Because, if you ask a sales rep to qualify out and you're not giving them a methodology to do it, they're not going to do it, right? They're not going to qualify out because they're hopeful, they're optimistic. Like, that's the nature of salespeople. But if you can definitively look at this opportunity and say, look, man, we've invested multiple cycles with this account and we still don't know who the economic buyer is. Okay, I'm going to encourage you to deprioritize this account until we get more cooperation from the client, right? And that's just logical and intelligent. And when you can teach sales reps to think like that, they're going to be much more efficient with their time. They're going to be much more efficient with the company's resources. their pipeline is going to be healthier, and that's going to continue to elevate the performance of themselves as well as, you know, the team and the business.
Now, has anybody spotted? I mean, I'm going to chuck something at you, which is a bit off the wall and a bit cheesy. Okay, so stand by. How many people have spotted that you've got your own initials in this acronym?
You know, Kevin, you're finally on to me. This has all been a self-serving plot from the beginning.
The 2 Ds in the middle.
I had to convince John McMahon that we needed 2 Ds. You know,
yeah, exactly.
The decision process and the decision criteria are very distinct things.
No, come on, you tell me. Has anyone ever spotted that before? Am I the first one to rumble you?
Well, my good friend Jack Napoli always said I put, you know, that yes, I was responsible for putting the double D in MEDDICC. So
I'm not the first. I'll have to catch up with Jack. I like the sound of him.
That's right.
Which is your favorite letter?
What's my favorite letter? Wow. Great. Yeah, it's a great question. It's funny. I always used to ask this question when I would do sales training, and the answers that I would always get would be, oh, you know, nothing better than a good champion. I got to have a great champion because a great champion is going to help me secure every other element of MEDDICC. And I'm like, I love that answer. You know, economic buyer, there's nothing better than, you know, strategically aligning with an executive early in the sales cycle, because the executive can obviously point you into the organization. So I'm like, love that answer. No argument whatsoever. But I used to just sort of, maybe just as a little bit of a, you know, just to have a little bit of fun with them, I used to say, you know what, my favorite letter is actually decision process. And the reason I love decision process is because give me a good process, give me a good above board, genuine process, you know, of integrity, where I can engage in a meaningful conversation with an account and with a person that I know is potentially a good fit for the solution I'm selling. Let me start there, and we'll be okay. You know, we'll be able to navigate through the rest. But I would still say that I think champions and economic buyer are a better answer, but decision process is not a bad answer either.
Love it. Absolutely love it.
And of course, sorry, we could do this all day, but you know, of course, the identification and implication of pain, right? That's the thing that creates the urgency. Mm-hmm. Right? So those are the things that lead to the compelling event. You know, that's another sort of key, you know, compelling event, right? That's the thing that obviously when organizations have competing priorities, right? There's got to be sort of the, you know, one of our other favorite frameworks is, you know, why anything, why now, and why you, right? Or why anything, why you, why now? But the sort of the, you know, if you're going to be able to answer the why now question, right, you have to be able to understand sort of what's the compelling event. And that compelling event is sort of buried in that identification and implication of pain.
Love it. Great answer. We're going to have to bring this in for a safe landing, Dick. I've got a couple more questions for you.
Okay.
We'll breeze off the topic of MEDDICC, which we've covered in a little bit of detail. Really interesting discussion. So thank you for that. Glad I rumbled you. Bit disappointed to find out that Napoli got there first, but you can't win them all. So you're a busy man, aren't you? I can tell you've got a lot on your plate. You've just joined this exciting new company as a C-level role. But what is it you do to unwind at the end of a busy day?
Wow. Okay. Well, you know, I unwind by, I'll tell you what, up the road from where I live, we have a beautiful college campus, and it sits on top of a hilltop. And so if you get there on a clear day, you can catch a really awesome sunset. I've got a 12-year-old black lab that, you know, we used to be able to jog there. Unfortunately, she gets a ride in a truck now up to the campus, and we get to stroll up there a little bit. She and I are aging together. But no, I just we enjoy the outdoors. I live in the beautiful suburbs of Philadelphia, and in Chester County, Pennsylvania. It's a beautiful part of the world, and in some ways, a lot of has a similar look and feel to certainly parts of England.
Well, it used to be British, Dick. Let's not forget that.
That's right. Yes,
so I get you guys your freedom a couple of hundred years ago.
Yeah, and thank you for that.
You're very welcome.
Yeah, we need a little bit of course. We need a little bit of course correction these days, but you know. Yeah,
you're only toddlers. Really, you're teenagers, I think, actually. So you're allowed to.
Yeah, so I've got 3 grown sons. My oldest son is in sales with a great company, bellwether company called ADP, and so yeah, he's up in the New York City area. And then I've got a son who's an artist, and he lives in Philadelphia. And then my youngest son is out in Salt Lake City. So 3 sons, and they're all doing their own thing and making their way. So it's been a pleasure to to watch them grow and start their own lives.
Well, let's carry on that theme for the last question then, shall we? What's the one piece of advice you would give them? What's the one thing you wish you knew at the beginning of your career that you picked up along the way?
Yeah, advice for the young folks. I think that there's a great thing that I learned. I took a course a couple of years ago, and it was called Transformational Leadership. Really cool. It's led by a great professor, Mike. I'll think of his last name in a minute, but he's Ivy League guy, and he's done incredibly innovative things. And he ran this great class, and one of the components within the class was this concept. It's a Japanese concept called ikigai. I think I'm saying that right. And so ikigai is the balance of the things that you're passionate about, the things that you're good at, and the things that you can get paid for.
Why didn't we have this conversation before I started my own coaching business?
Right.
Yeah.
So, it's funny, like people will say, well, just follow your passion, just follow your passion.
Yeah. No.
That's maybe part of the equation, right?
The bit I missed was getting paid.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So, but you put those things together, right? And I think that, of course, there are trade-offs that you make. Sometimes you find yourself maybe doing things that maybe this is not exactly the thing that I wanted to do, but I'm getting well paid. Or, I'm doing the thing that I really want to do, but I'm not, it's not as fulfilling as maybe something else. So these 3 dimensions are things that, you sort of balance over the course of your career, and you sort of learn that everybody has their own kind of formula for sort of optimizing. I've got a son that's working really hard as a sales rep, and I've got a son that's an artist. And they're both of them, I think, are feeling, pretty fulfilled, but in very different ways. So I think it's about balancing those things, and ultimately, it's a lifelong journey. And I hope that all of those young people out there will find their way to their ikigai.
Thank you, Dick. What a great conversation.
It's been a pleasure, Kevin. Always a pleasure to see you.
And thank you to the listener. Please leave us a review if you like what you hear, because it helps enormously to boost the listenership.